One question, 30 employees. Only one answer would change everything. The conference room fell silent as the man at the head of the table looked around slowly, deliberately. He'd spent a week watching these people, studying them, testing them without their knowledge. What do you think matters most in this company? The room erupted with polished responses. Innovation, growth, market dominance. Each answer more rehearsed than the last. Each employee leaning forward with calculated confidence. But in the back corner, a young woman in a thrift store blazer stayed quiet, hands folded, eyes uncertain. When someone finally called on her, she hesitated. Not because she didn't know the answer, but because she knew her truth wouldn't sound impressive. People, she said softly, without compassion, everything we build collapses. The man at the head of the table froze. Have you ever been tested without knowing it? Drop a comment. Because what happened in that Chicago boardroom wasn't just an experiment. It was a reckoning. Silas Carrington was a billionaire tech CEO. Forbes covers. Market disruption. Ruthless efficiency. He'd build an empire by being smarter, faster, colder than everyone else. He wanted to find loyalty. What he found instead would break him open. $300 million in annual revenue. 1,200 employees. Zero connection to any of them. That was a problem Silas couldn't solve with algorithms or quarterly projections. He'd become so isolated by success that he no longer knew if his company had a soul, or if he'd accidentally built a machine that only pretended to care. So he designed an experiment. For 1 week, he would disappear. No announcements, no explanations. Instead, he'd return as Sam Carter, a visiting efficiency consultant hired to observe operations and recommend improvements. Different glasses, modest gray suit from a department store, a rental sedan instead of the Mercedes. He looked like middle management. Forgettable, invisible, perfect. Monday morning, he walked into his own building, and nobody recognized him. Security waved him through. Employees rushed past without a glance. He was just another face in the corporate machinery. The performances started immediately. Managers stayed late with strategic visibility. Teams held loud brainstorming sessions near his temporary office. Everyone wanted to impress the consultant who might have the CEO's ear. Everyone except the girl who arrived at 6 in the morning to clean the break room. Tessa Monroe, 22, intern in the marketing department. She moved quietly through the space, wiping down counters, restocking coffee supplies, straightening chairs that didn't need straightening. Nobody thanked her. Nobody noticed. Silas almost didn't either. He was looking for wolves. He didn't realize the answer would come from someone who'd never learned to hunt. Day 1, Richard from sales pitched an expansion strategy he'd clearly stolen from his junior analyst. Took full credit in front of the consultant. 30 minutes later, Silas saw Tessa quietly congratulating that same analyst in the hallway, telling her the research was brilliant. Day 2, team lunch. Everyone ordered steaks and wine, expense accounts flashing like badges of importance. Tessa unpacked leftovers from a plastic container. Dinner scraps from her night shift at the diner. She offered half to the new hire who'd forgotten lunch money. Day 3, mandatory late night. Everyone stayed until 9, typing loudly, signed dramatically, making sure Sam saw their dedication. At 10, after they'd all left, Silas found Tessa still there, actually working, then stopped and helped the janitor move heavy trash bins. The pattern crystallized over days. Performance versus presence. Ambition versus authenticity. His employees had become actors in a play about success. They knew their lines, hit their marks, delivered polished versions of themselves that matched what they thought power wanted to see. Tessa just existed, honestly, without calculation. She asked how his day was, then actually listened to the answer, defended a colleague being gossiped about in the break room, stayed late not for show, but because the work mattered to her. Small moments, unremarkable to anyone else. To Silas, they landed like grenades. Have you ever met someone who restored your faith in people? Hit that subscribe button if you want more stories like this. By Thursday, something uncomfortable was stirring in his chest. a memory he'd spent years burying under spreadsheets and shareholder meetings. His mother's voice, soft, persistent, dying. Don't let success make you forget how to care. He'd nodded then, promised, then built an empire that proved he'd forgotten everything. Friday, final day, the test. Silas sent a company-wide message, mandatory meeting for PM main conference room. The speculation started immediately. Layoffs? Restructuring? Performance reviews? The building hummed with nervous energy. At 4 sharp, 30 employees filed in. Department heads, senior managers, a handful of rising stars, and Tessa, who slipped into a back corner chair, wondering why an intern had been included. Sam Carter stood at the head of the mahogany table, hands in pockets, expression unreadable. I've spent the week observing this company, he began, watching how you work, how you treat each other, what you prioritize when you think nobody important is looking. The room tensed. I have one question before I submit my report to Mr. Carrington. What do you think matters most in this company? A beat of silence. Then hand shot up. Innovation drives everything we do here. Marcus from product development declared, we're disruptors. That's our DNA. Market dominance and quarterly growth, added Jennifer from finance. Without revenue, nothing else exists. Staying ahead of competitors, Richard jumped in. We're only as good as our next breakthrough. Building shareholder value through sustainable expansion strategies. Each answer more polished than the last. More empty. More exactly what they thought a consultant wanted to hear. Silas felt something die inside him with every word. This is what I built. Ambition without soul. Intelligence without humanity. Miss Monroe. A senior manager turned toward the back. You're awfully quiet. What do you think? Tessa's face went pale. All eyes on her. The youngest person in the room. The least important. She hesitated. Not from ignorance, but from the weight of speaking truth in a room that rewarded performance. What would your answer be? Comment below. People, she said finally, without compassion, everything we build collapses. The silence that followed wasn't polite. It was shocked, uncomfortable. Someone actually scoffed. 7 words. That's all it took to shatter a billionaire's carefully constructed world. Silas removed his glasses. Stood differently. Let the mask fall away. My name isn't Sam Carter. The room shifted. Confusion spreading like spilled water. I'm Silas Carrington. Chaos. Faces went white. Someone gasped. Richard looked like he might be sick. Jennifer's confident posture crumbled into mortification. This was a test. I wanted to see who you really were when you thought I wasn't watching. Panic rippled through the room. Backtracking. Justifying. Mental calculations about job security and career trajectories spinning behind every pair of eyes. But Silas wasn't looking at them. He was looking at Tessa, who'd gone impossibly still, hands gripping the edge of her chair. Miss Monroe. She flinched. You're the only person in this room who told the truth. She thought she was being fired. Intern presumption. Speaking out of turn. Saying something soft in a hard world. You reminded me of something I've forgotten. His voice caught just slightly. Just enough to prove he was human beneath the billions. Something vital. The room held its breath. My mother was an immigrant. Single parent. Worked 3 jobs so I could go to college. Housekeeping, factory night shifts, weekend catering. She built nothing but gave everything. He paused, gathering himself. When she was dying, she held my hand and said, don't let success make you forget how to care. Don't become so big you can't see the people who hold you up. The vulnerability was startling. This man didn't show cracks. Ever. Somewhere along the way, I stopped listening. Started measuring worth in metrics instead of humanity. He looked around the room. You gave me what you thought I wanted. Performance, ambition, polished answers. She gave me what I needed. The truth. Not anger. Disappointment in himself. This company became exactly what I feared. Efficient and empty. Successful and soulless. He turned back to Tessa. You work night shifts at a diner. You arrive early to clean a break room nobody asked you to clean. You defend people behind their backs and share your lunch with strangers. You do these things because they matter to you, not because anyone's watching. His voice softened. Thank you for reminding me what leadership actually means. The meeting ended quietly. No drama, no theatrics, just truth settling like snow. 1 week later, Silas called another company-wide meeting. The energy was different this time. Quieter, more uncertain. People filed in wondering if the hammer was about to drop. Instead, Silas announced the Employee Empowerment Initiative, full tuition coverage for any employee pursuing education, undergraduate, graduate, trade school, certifications. No strings attached. Childcare support for working parents. Comprehensive mental health resources. Emergency financial assistance fund for unexpected hardships. Inspired by someone who showed me what real strength looks like, he said, looking directly at Tessa. Then came the second announcement. Miss Monroe, I'd like to offer you a position as my personal assistant. Now to get me coffee, I'm capable of that myself. But to keep me honest, to challenge my decisions, to remind me when I'm optimizing for profit and forgetting about people. Tessa stood frozen in the back of the room. I'm just an intern, she managed. You're the only person who remembered we're human. That makes you more qualified than anyone else in this building. She accepted, not because she needed validation or wanted power, but because she understood the work that needed doing. The month that followed proved transformation isn't instant, but it's possible. Management underwent training on empathetic leadership. The anonymous feedback system that had been decorative suddenly had teeth. Silas read every submission himself, promoted people based on character as much as competence. The culture shift was tangible. Richard, the manager who'd stolen credit, started publicly acknowledging his team's contributions. The break room Tessa used to clean alone now had volunteers. Small act of kindness multiplied like compound interest. And the business? It grew. Turns out people work harder when they're valued. Innovation flows better when fear doesn't choke it. Loyalty can't be demanded, only earned. Tessa kept working diner night shifts on weekends. Silas asked why. Keeps me grounded, she said. Reminds me where I came from. Who I'm working for when we make decisions up here. He understood. Started volunteering at the food bank on Saturdays. Reconnected with the neighborhood he'd grown up in before wealth insulated him from reality. One evening, he visited his mother's grave. Told her he finally understood. That he'd lost his way, but someone had helped him find it again. That her lessons hadn't been wasted, just dormant. Compassion isn't weakness. It's the foundation everything else stands on. The experiment had been designed to find the best employee. Instead, it found a mirror, reflected back a man who'd traded humanity for efficiency and called it success. I designed a test to find loyalty, Silas admitted to Tessa months later. What I found was myself, and realized I didn't like what I'd become. 6 months after that conference room question, Silas and Tessa stood in that same space, reviewing quarterly reports, employee satisfaction scores, highest in the industry, retention rates up 40%, applications flooding in from people who wanted to work somewhere that actually valued humans. But those weren't the metrics that mattered most. What mattered was the single mother in accounting who could finally afford quality childcare, the developer going back to school without drowning in debt, the maintenance worker whose medical emergency didn't bankrupt his family. Numbers that measured lives instead of just profits. One question changed everything, Silas said, but only because someone dared to answer honestly. Tessa shook her head. I just told the truth. I didn't know it would matter. Honesty always matters, especially when you're surrounded by performance. The lesson had cost him nothing financially and everything personally. Success without compassion is just expensive emptiness. The people closest to struggle often understand what matters most. Real leadership means being willing to be changed by truth. You can't build anything lasting on performance and fear. Tessa's perspective was simpler. People forget that companies are just collections of humans trying to pay rent and raise kids and find meaning. When you optimize for everything except their humanity, you've already lost. Silas learned the experiment wasn't about testing his employees. It was about testing whether he still had a heart beneath the ambition, whether success had calcified him beyond redemption. Turned out it hadn't, but it had taken someone with nothing to lose to show someone with everything that he'd already lost what mattered most. If this story hit home, smash that like button and subscribe. Have you ever spoken truth to power? What happened? Share your story in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply be real in a world that rewards performance. He wanted to find the best employee. Instead, he found himself and remembered what he'd lost along the way. Sometimes the greatest discovery isn't who passes the test. It's why you needed to give one in the first place.